In the heat of World War II, beneath the vast Pacific Ocean, two American submarines, USS Darter and USS Dace, launched a daring assault that would alter the course of history. In a single night of relentless warfare, they sank two powerful Japanese cruisers and crippled a third, dealing a devastating blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy. This is the story of one of the most spectacular submarine victories of the war, a tale of stealth, precision, and sheer naval dominance. USS Darter and USS Dace, two formidable submarines of the U.S. Navy, patrolled the vast waters of the Pacific in late October 1944. As part of the silent service, their role was as crucial as it was dangerous. Their mission was to disrupt enemy supply lines, engage high-value targets, and weaken the Imperial Japanese Navy's ability to sustain its war effort. These submarines were built for stealth and precision, equipped with advanced sonar, torpedo systems, and the tactical training necessary for engaging heavily armed warships. They operated under the constant threat of detection, where a single mistake could mean the difference between survival and destruction. Their patrol area, the Palawan Passage, was a critical maritime corridor through which Japanese naval forces frequently moved. With the impending American invasion of the Philippines, Japanese commanders mobilized their fleet for a decisive confrontation. Among the vessels heading toward battle were the heavy cruisers Atago, Takao, and Maya, part of a larger formation known as the Center Force, under the command of Admiral Takao. These powerful warships were vital to Japan's strategy in the upcoming engagement, their presence signaling the might of the Imperial fleet. Yet, unbeknownst to them, they were sailing directly into the crosshairs of two submarines waiting beneath the waves. Darter and Dace had spent days tracking enemy movements, navigating the depths in near silence while awaiting the perfect opportunity to strike. Communication between the two submarines was minimal yet efficient, their coordination honed by months of rigorous training. Every move was deliberate, every decision calculated. The tension on board was palpable as sonar operators listened intently for signs of an approaching target. The moment they had been waiting for arrived in the dead of night on October 23, 1944, when sonar contact confirmed a large enemy force moving into range. The crew braced for battle, knowing that within moments, they would be launching an attack that could alter the course of the war. As the Japanese warships approached, the submarines adjusted their positions, each maneuvering to gain the most effective torpedo spread. Darter locked onto Atago, Admiral Kurita's flagship, while Dace focused its sights on Maya. The distance closed rapidly. Every second counted. The torpedo tubes were primed, and final calculations were made. When the moment was right, a series of orders rang through the hulls. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. A sequence of deadly torpedoes surged forward, cutting through the water in eerie silence before their impact shattered the night. Darter's torpedoes found their mark first. Atago, struck multiple times along her hull, was torn apart by a series of violent explosions. The massive cruiser, once a symbol of naval strength, was now a sinking wreck. Within minutes, she began to list, taking on water at an uncontrollable rate. Chaos erupted on board as crew members scrambled to abandon ship. Flames engulfed portions of the deck, casting an orange glow over the dark sea. The realization that the flagship was doomed spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through the entire formation. Dace's torpedoes followed, striking Maya with devastating force. The explosion sent a towering column of fire and debris into the sky. The cruiser, unable to withstand the barrage, succumbed quickly. Water rushed into her hull, overwhelming internal compartments and dooming her fate. As sailors leaped into the sea, the ship disappeared beneath the waves, another casualty of the relentless American submarine assault. The third cruiser, Takao, was not spared. Though not immediately sunk, she sustained severe damage from torpedo impacts. The force of the blasts crippled vital systems, leaving her limping and vulnerable. Unlike her doomed sister ships, she managed to stay afloat, but was no longer fit for battle. She retreated, her mission effectively over before it had even begun. Aboard the submarines, the crew remained silent for a brief moment, processing the magnitude of their success. The mission had been executed flawlessly. 2 enemy cruisers had been destroyed, and a third was disabled. It was a strike that would leave the Japanese fleet reeling, an attack that had not only eliminated significant firepower, but had also demoralized an enemy preparing for one of the largest naval battles in history. Despite the victory, there was no time for celebration. The submarines had to evade any counterattacks, as enemy destroyers scrambled to locate the unseen assailants. Depth charges were a real threat, capable of turning their triumph into tragedy within seconds. The orders came swiftly. Darter and Dace dove deeper, their movements precise as they slipped away into the darkness. Their actions that night would have far-reaching consequences. The destruction of Atago and Maya not only weakened the Japanese naval force, but also disrupted its chain of command. Admiral Kurita, forced to abandon his flagship, was left to re-establish control in the chaos that followed. The loss of these warships meant that fewer resources would be available to challenge the American fleet in the coming days. What happened in the waters of the Palawan Passage was a testament to the skill, discipline, and bravery of the submariners who carried out the attack. Their ability to remain undetected, deliver an overwhelming strike, and escape without casualties highlighted the effectiveness of the silent service. This operation was more than just another battle. It was a pivotal moment that showcased the strategic value of submarines in modern warfare. For Darter and Dace, the mission was far from over. They would continue to patrol the Pacific, hunting enemy vessels and playing their part in the final push toward victory. Their names would be etched into history, their actions remembered as one of the most successful submarine operations of World War II. And though the war was not yet won, on that fateful night, beneath the surface of the ocean, 2 American submarines had struck a decisive blow, proving that even in the vastness of the sea, there was no escape from the reach of a well-placed torpedo. The night remained eerily silent after the torpedoes had done their deadly work. Below the surface, USS Darter and USS Dace kept their distance, carefully listening for enemy movements. The sinking of Atago and Maya had sent shockwaves through the Japanese fleet, leaving Takao limping but still afloat. Though the immediate threat was eliminated, the submarines knew that the Imperial Navy would not let this attack go unanswered. Destroyers and the escort force would soon begin an aggressive search, launching depth charges in an effort to destroy the submarines responsible for the devastation. The crews aboard Darter and Dace remained tense, aware that any wrong move could expose their position. Sonar operators monitored the water, tracking the chaotic movements of Japanese ships above. Explosions reverberated through the ocean as enemy destroyers began their counteroffensive, deploying depth charges in wide patterns to flush out the attackers. Each blast sent powerful shockwaves through the submarines, rattling equipment and testing the nerve of every sailor on board. They had executed a near-perfect ambush, but now their survival depended on evading detection. Aboard Darter, Commander David McClintock relied on experience and instinct. He knew the key to escaping was remaining undetected, avoiding any sudden maneuvers that might alert the destroyers to their position. Every sound, every movement inside the submarine had to be kept to a minimum. The crew remained composed, holding their breath as sonar pings echoed through the hull. Moments stretched into eternity as the submarine slowly crept away from the hunting ships above. Dace, commanded by Bladen Claggett, faced the same relentless pursuit. The submarine's crew could hear explosions growing fainter in the distance, a sign that the enemy's search patterns were shifting. Their careful maneuvering was paying off. The enemy had no confirmed position, and the hunt would eventually exhaust itself. Still, there was no room for error. A single miscalculation could mean destruction. Above the surface, Takao struggled to remain afloat. Her hull had been ruptured, machinery severely damaged. The once powerful cruiser, designed to lead assaults and defend against enemy incursions, was now a liability to the fleet. She had to retreat, escorted away from the battleground, while warships remained behind to conduct the search for submarines. The Japanese commanders knew that time was against them. With each passing hour, their formation was becoming weaker. The submarines had not only inflicted physical damage, but had also disrupted the cohesion of the fleet. For Darter and Dace, escape became a waiting game. They had to be patient, letting the enemy exhaust their resources before making any bold moves. The destroyers, desperate to exact revenge, spent hours circling the waters, searching for a target that had long since slipped away. Eventually, the search began to lose intensity. With their fuel and ammunition running low, the destroyers had no choice but to pull back, allowing the submarines an opportunity to break away. By dawn, the ocean was calm again, but the effects of the attack remained undeniable. 2 of Japan's formidable heavy cruisers had been lost, and a third was out of commission. Admiral Kurita, having survived the sinking of Atago, was forced to shift his command. The Imperial Navy's plan had been thrown into disarray, their formation weakened before they even reached the anticipated battle at Leyte Gulf. The submarines had delivered a decisive blow without ever surfacing, proving the deadly efficiency of underwater warfare. Despite their success, neither Darter nor Dace had time to celebrate. The mission was still in progress, and their orders remained clear. Continue patrolling, disrupt enemy operations, and report any further movements. They had already made a significant impact, but the war was far from over. As the submarines navigated away from the immediate threat, they maintained communication, discussing their next course of action. Their victory had placed them in a powerful position, but it also meant that enemy forces were now fully aware of the danger lurking beneath the waters. They had to proceed with caution. Darter, however, would soon face an unexpected challenge. As she maneuvered through the narrow waters of Palawan Passage, disaster struck. In the early hours of October 24th, while repositioning for a potential follow-up attack, she ran aground on an uncharted reef. The impact was sudden, jolting the entire crew as the submarine came to an abrupt halt. Immediate efforts were made to reverse off the reef, but the damage was extensive. The submarine was stuck, vulnerable, and unable to continue her mission. Recognizing the grave situation, McClintock ordered an emergency evacuation. Dace, still operational, moved in to assist. The stranded crew was quickly transferred to the sister submarine, leaving behind a vessel that had served with distinction but was now beyond saving. Before departing, the crew ensured that classified materials, equipment, and sensitive technology were destroyed to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Darter's loss was a significant setback, but her legacy had already been cemented. She had played a key role in one of the most successful submarine attacks of the war, demonstrating the power of coordinated strikes from beneath the waves. Though her mission had ended, her crew continued the fight aboard Dace, carrying forward the expertise and determination that had made their operation such a success. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, the attack was a wake-up call. The power of American submarines was undeniable, and their ability to strike without warning posed a serious threat to future operations. The events of that night would ripple through the chain of command, forcing adjustments in tactics and strategy. But the damage had already been done. The submarines had proven that even the mightiest warships were not invincible when faced with the silent hunters of the deep. As Dace sailed away with the rescued crew of Darter, the war pressed on. The destruction of Atago and Maya was a clear indication that Japan's dominance at sea was slipping. More battles lay ahead, and the submarines would continue their relentless pursuit of enemy targets. Their actions had set the stage for the coming confrontation at Leyte Gulf, where the fate of the Pacific would be decided. The loss of USS Darter was a heavy blow, but her crew was safe aboard USS Dace, ready to continue the fight. As Dace sailed away from the shallow reef where Darter lay stranded, the crew reflected on the mission they had just completed. They had delivered one of the most devastating submarine attacks of the war, striking 2 major Japanese cruisers from the depths and crippling a third. However, there was no time for complacency. The war was still raging, and every available asset was needed to push forward in the Pacific. Their success had disrupted the enemy, but they knew the Japanese fleet was still formidable. Admiral Kurita, having survived the sinking of his flagship Atago, had been forced to transfer to another vessel. The destruction of 2 cruisers and the damage to Takao had significantly weakened his force. This was not just a tactical loss, it was a psychological one. The Japanese Navy, once considered nearly invincible in the Pacific, had just been outmaneuvered by 2 silent hunters lurking beneath the waves. Submarines had once been seen as secondary threats compared to surface warships, but this engagement had proven otherwise. Stealth, precision, and timing had turned the tide in favor of the Americans before the major battle at Leyte Gulf even began. As Dace moved through the Pacific waters, her captain and crew remained on high alert. Though they had escaped immediate retaliation, the risk was far from over. The Imperial Japanese Navy had suffered a devastating loss, but they were not likely to retreat without a fight. Enemy ships still roamed the region, and the submarine had to maintain a delicate balance between caution and aggression. Their mission was far from over, and they remained prepared to strike if another opportunity presented itself. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the attack sent shockwaves through the Japanese command. The loss of 2 heavy cruisers was significant, not just in terms of firepower, but in overall fleet coordination. Atago and Maya had been integral parts of the center force, a major component of the Japanese fleet, intended to counter the advancing American forces. With Takao barely operational, the Japanese found themselves scrambling to adjust their strategy. This disruption was felt at the highest levels, forcing rapid changes that would affect the outcome of the upcoming battle. Dace continued patrolling the waters, gathering intelligence and monitoring enemy movements. Reports from other submarines and reconnaissance planes confirmed that the Japanese fleet was still pressing forward, but its confidence had been shaken. The once mighty Imperial Navy was now operating with a level of uncertainty it had not shown earlier in the war. Every engagement they lost, every warship that was sunk, eroded their ability to maintain control of the Pacific. The American strategy of using submarines to cripple supply lines and weaken enemy formations was proving more effective than ever. The loss of USS Darter was a sobering reminder that even the most experienced crews could find themselves in danger. Running aground had not been a result of enemy action, but rather an unfortunate miscalculation in the heat of battle. Still, the decision to evacuate and destroy sensitive materials ensured that no critical intelligence would fall into enemy hands. Dace carried on the fight, knowing that the best way to honor Darter's legacy was to continue executing missions with the same level of precision and bravery. As the damaged Takao limped toward Singapore for repairs, the Americans considered their next moves. The attack had already set the stage for the massive confrontation that was about to unfold at Leyte Gulf. The Japanese fleet, though still a formidable force, had been severely weakened. Every ship lost made their ability to wage an effective naval campaign more difficult. The submarines had done their job in softening the enemy before the larger American fleet arrived to engage in direct combat. Dace's crew remained ready for any development. The Pacific was vast, and every mission required patience and adaptability. The role of submarines in warfare had evolved dramatically since the early days of the war. No longer just an afterthought in naval engagements, they had become one of the most critical components of the U.S. strategy. They were the unseen force that could strike when least expected, crippling the enemy from beneath the waves and ensuring that every Japanese warship faced a constant threat. The impact of this operation was felt far beyond the immediate battle zone. News of the attack reached high command, and the effectiveness of submarine warfare was further validated. Submariners had long been regarded as a specialized force, operating in isolation beneath the surface, but their influence on the broader conflict was undeniable. Every ship they sank was another step toward victory, another obstacle removed from the path of American forces as they pushed deeper into Japanese-controlled territory. As the war pressed on, the lessons learned from Darter and Dace's attack would be applied to future operations. The precision and coordination demonstrated in this engagement reinforced the importance of well-executed submarine tactics. The attack had not only destroyed enemy ships, but had also disrupted the carefully laid plans of the Japanese command. The ability to inflict such damage without suffering a single loss in battle was a testament to the training, discipline, and effectiveness of the American submarine fleet. Though Darter would never return to action, her legacy lived on through the men who had served aboard her and through the victories that followed. Her final mission had left an undeniable mark on the war, proving that even the most powerful enemy fleets were not immune to the dangers lurking beneath the waves. Dace continued to serve, carrying on the fight in the vast expanse of the Pacific, ready to strike again when the opportunity arose. The war was far from over, and greater battles lay ahead. But in that moment, beneath the dark waters of the Pacific, the silent warriors of the deep had already shifted the balance. The enemy was wounded, the tide was turning, and the final push for victory had begun. As USS Dace continued her mission, the full impact of the submarine attack became evident. The Japanese fleet, already reeling from the losses inflicted by American air and naval forces, now had to contend with the destruction of 2 heavy cruisers and the severe damage to a third. The attack had not only disrupted their immediate plans, but had also exposed vulnerabilities in their fleet coordination. The loss of Atago, a flagship that carried key leadership, forced a rapid restructuring of command. With Admiral Kurita transferred to another vessel, the cohesion of the fleet was shaken at a critical moment. For the American forces, this was a significant victory. The effectiveness of submarines as strategic weapons had once again been proven. Beyond sinking enemy vessels, these underwater hunters had the power to change the course of battles before they even began. The attack by Darter and Dace had done more than just eliminate warships. It had contributed to the overall weakening of Japan's ability to wage war at sea. Every loss diminished the enemy's firepower, reducing their ability to mount effective counteroffensives. As the damaged Takao limped toward Singapore, it was evident that she would not be returning to combat anytime soon. The war had entered a phase where every resource counted, and losing such a powerful vessel was a serious blow. Repairs would take months, time the Japanese could not afford as the Allied advance pressed deeper into their territory. The inability to field their full fleet strength meant that upcoming engagements, particularly at Leyte Gulf, would be fought under increasingly unfavorable conditions. Aboard Dace, the crew remained vigilant. The mission was not over simply because of one successful engagement. Submarine warfare required constant awareness, patience, and readiness to strike again when the moment presented itself. The ocean was vast, but so was the responsibility they carried. Their actions had already shaped the course of events, but there was always more to be done. The Pacific was still a contested battlefield, and they knew that at any moment, another engagement could emerge. News of the attack spread quickly through military channels. Commanders recognized the significance of what had been accomplished, and submariners across the fleet saw it as validation of their role in the war. For years, they had operated in the shadows, targeting enemy convoys, supply ships, and warships with relentless precision. Yet now, their influence was being felt at the highest levels of strategic planning. The ability of submarines to weaken the enemy before major battles had changed how naval warfare was conducted. The lessons from this operation would not be lost. Submarine crews studied every aspect of the attack, analyzing what had worked and what could be improved. Coordination between multiple submarines had proven invaluable, allowing for a greater spread of firepower and ensuring that targets were overwhelmed before they could react. The ability to strike quickly and vanish into the depths remained their greatest asset. Future missions would build on these tactics, refining them for even greater success. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, the realization was grim. They had underestimated the reach and power of American submarines. Their fleet, once thought to be unchallenged in the Pacific, was now vulnerable at every turn. Supply lines were disrupted, warships were no longer safe in transit, and the psychological effect of knowing that enemy submarines lurked beneath the waves added an element of uncertainty to every operation. The war was shifting, and the Japanese were finding it increasingly difficult to adapt. As Dace continued on patrol, the crew reflected on the events that had unfolded. There was satisfaction in knowing they had struck a decisive blow, but they also knew the dangers that still lay ahead. Each mission carried risks, and submariners understood that survival was never guaranteed. Yet their determination never wavered. They were part of a force that was turning the tide of the war, one engagement at a time. With every passing day, the Pacific became an increasingly hostile place for Japanese warships. The attack had reinforced the effectiveness of the submarine blockade, further tightening the noose around Japan's ability to sustain its war effort. Fuel shortages, disrupted supply chains, and the constant loss of experienced crews placed additional strain on an already struggling military. The pressure continued to mount, and the long-term consequences of each engagement became more apparent. The war at sea was changing, and the role of submarines had expanded far beyond their initial expectations. They were no longer just a tool for disrupting enemy supply lines. They had become a force capable of dismantling fleets before battles could even begin. Their stealth, precision, and ability to strike with devastating impact made them one of the most feared weapons in the American arsenal. For Darter and Dace, the mission at Palawan Passage was a defining moment. It was proof that a well-coordinated attack could cripple even the most formidable enemy formations. Though Darter had been lost to the reef, her legacy endured through the impact of her actions. The men who had served aboard her carried their experience forward, ensuring that her final mission was not in vain. As the war pressed on, the lessons from this engagement would shape future operations. The knowledge gained from this encounter would influence how submarine warfare was conducted in the final years of the conflict. The ocean remained a battleground, but with each success, the path to victory became clearer. The attack on the Japanese cruisers had been a moment of triumph, but it was also a reminder of the unforgiving nature of war. Every victory came at a cost, and every decision carried weight. As Dace continued her patrol, the crew remained focused, knowing that at any moment, they could once again be called upon to strike. The silent hunters of the deep had made their mark, and the war was steadily moving toward its final, inevitable conclusion. The waters of the Pacific stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast and unpredictable battlefield where victory and survival depended on skill, patience, and the ability to strike unseen. For USS Dace, the mission continued, but the impact of the attack on the Japanese cruisers would resonate far beyond the immediate battle. The silent war beneath the waves had proven its effectiveness once again, demonstrating that even the mightiest naval fleets could be crippled by the relentless pursuit of submarines. The enemy now knew that every journey carried a hidden risk, that beneath the surface, an unseen force waited for the right moment to strike. As Dace maintained her patrol, the crew remained sharp, knowing that their role in the war was far from over. Every day brought new challenges, and every hour tested their endurance. The ocean was unforgiving, and the men who fought beneath its surface understood the dangers better than anyone. The victories they achieved were often unseen by the world above, but their impact shaped the course of the conflict. The attack on Atago Maya and Takao had not only inflicted immediate damage, but had also sent a powerful message to the enemy. The depths belonged to the hunters, and no warship was safe. The Japanese fleet, once feared for its dominance, had suffered another devastating loss. The cracks in their strategy were widening, their ability to maneuver unchallenged slipping away. Every defeat brought them closer to the realization that their once mighty naval power was dwindling, that the relentless push of Allied forces was becoming unstoppable. The submarines, operating in the shadows, had played a crucial role in this shift, and their success was not just measured in the number of ships sunk, but in the growing uncertainty and fear instilled in their adversaries. For the men aboard Dace, the war was personal. Each mission carried the weight of those who had served before them, those who had fought and sacrificed to bring the war to its inevitable conclusion. They had seen the cost of battle, felt the pressure of decision-making in the most critical moments, and understood the fragility of life beneath the waves. Their actions were calculated, deliberate, each movement executed with precision because a single mistake could mean disaster. They had watched as their torpedoes found their mark, as enemy ships were torn apart by explosions, and as the ocean swallowed vessels that had once been symbols of power. The loss of Darter was a sobering reminder that even the most skilled crews were not immune to misfortune. She had played her part, had struck with lethal efficiency, and though she would never return to the fight, her legacy was carried forward by those who had served aboard her. They had completed their mission, and their actions had left a mark on history. There was no shame in her final fate, only the acknowledgement that war did not spare even the most formidable. The crew that once called her home had moved on, carrying their experience into new battles, ensuring that her name would not be forgotten. As the days passed, the impact of the attack continued to ripple through the conflict. Intelligence reports confirmed the enemy's struggles, the setbacks they faced as they tried to recover from the loss of key warships. The American fleet was gaining ground, and with each successful operation, the path to victory became clearer. The Pacific was no longer a place where Japan could assert its dominance. It was a battlefield where every engagement tilted the balance further in favor of the Allies. The submarines, once viewed as supplemental forces, had proven themselves to be one of the most effective weapons in the war. The men aboard Dace carried on, knowing that their work was far from done. Patrols continued, new targets were identified, and the hunt remained constant. They understood that they were part of something greater, that their actions contributed to a war effort that was shifting the course of history. They did not fight for recognition, nor did they seek personal glory. Their purpose was clear: to weaken the enemy, to protect their fellow sailors, and to do their part in bringing an end to the war. As time went on, the victories of submarines like Darter and Dace became stories told among those who served beneath the waves. They were reminders of the risks and rewards of the silent war, of the precision required to succeed in a battle where the enemy could not see them coming. Their actions had paved the way for future engagements, had demonstrated the power of coordinated attacks, and had ensured that the enemy would never again underestimate the force lurking below. In the end, the war would be won through the efforts of many, through battles fought in the air, on land, and at sea. But beneath the surface, in the quiet depths where only the most determined dared to go, the submarines had left their mark. They had reshaped the battlefield, had disrupted plans before they could unfold, and had ensured that no enemy ship could sail without fear of what lay beneath. As USS Dace sailed on, disappearing into the vast expanse of the Pacific, her crew remained ready. They had seen what could be accomplished through patience, skill, and precision. They had witnessed the power of a well-placed strike, the impact of a torpedo finding its target. The mission was never-ending, but they knew their place in it. They were part of a legacy, part of a force that had proven its worth time and time again. The war would continue, battles would be fought, and history would be written. But on that night, in the waters where Atago and Maya had met their end, the submarines had won a victory that would be remembered. The silent hunters had struck, and the ocean itself had become their battlefield. They had shown that even in the darkest depths, where the world above could not see them, they had the power to change the course of war. And as long as the fight remained, they would be there, waiting beneath the waves, ready to strike again.